A lot of Florida fans not happy with the recruiting rankings up until about a week ago, but we knew Billy Napier and staff were doing some work, and here comes some commits. The top 3 in the class committed just in the last few days. We got David Waters on the line from Gators Breakdown to break it all down. David, how you doing today?
Good, Mark. How about you, man?
Doing just fine. So I've seen this latest post with your Gators Breakdown podcast up to number 40 among all sports podcasts. So there's not too many more rungs to climb, David. You're going to be sitting on the top of the world here pretty soon.
Hey, Mark, when as you mentioned, the recruiting news recently helps there. So in these summer months when fans are starving for some football, we start seeing commits roll in for all these schools. And Gator fans, like you said, we're definitely waiting for a commit started rolling in. So yeah, no surprise that they were waiting, and it was just waiting for listen to the podcast at the same time to get the latest on the Gators' newest commitments.
I can't imagine that anybody watching, listening right now is not aware of Gators Breakdown, but in case you're not, because of course we've got fans from all different areas of college football, head on over to Gators Breakdown for Florida football coverage like nowhere else. All right, David. Yeah, the 3 top players in the class all come in between July 7th and just a few days later. Your rundown on Eugene Wilson, TJ Searcy, Trayon Webb.
Yeah, and that also quarterback Marcus Stokes. He committed on the 7th as well with Trayon Webb. So that was, I'm in Jacksonville. I'm based in Jacksonville. So both those kids, Stokes and Webb, are in the Jacksonville area. So, of course, I had, some a little more eyes toward those 2 commitments just because of, working for a local news station here in Jacksonville as well. So we get that side of it more than just, for me, the Gator side of it, the local Jacksonville aspect of it too, making big news for Florida, getting kids out of Jacksonville. And it didn't start too well, Mark. Roderick Kearney, a big-time offensive lineman, committed to FSU. Grayson Howard, big-time linebacker in the area, committed to South Carolina. And both, Florida was going after heavy and hard. And so it didn't start too well. But then 3 recent commits in the area: Sharif Denson, the cornerback out of Barton Trail. And as I mentioned, Marcus Stokes out of Ponte Vedra Nice. If that school sounds familiar, that's exactly where Tim Tebow played high school football. And then also Trayon Webb from Trinity Christian, who Florida just had to do a better job of recruiting Trinity Christian guys, not going to Ohio State, not going to Alabama, Georgia, Miami. Florida needed to do a better job of recruiting Trinity Christian here in Jacksonville, better, a powerhouse in the area that just sends athletes all over the country. So Florida just had to do better there. So they rebounded pretty nice from a slow start in Jacksonville, got their quarterback for the class in Marcus Stokes, kind of a creative style of quarterback, moved the pocket a lot for him in an RPO offense, throws on the run a lot. So you'd like to see more 3, 5, 7-step drop. And I had his quarterback trainer, Denny Thompson, on, who's based here in Jacksonville as well. Those are things they're going to be working on. And of course, Florida will be working on as well once he gets on campus. He won't look to be an instant day one starter at quarterback, but he brings a lot of creativity to the position. And then Trayon Webb, the running back, played a little bit injured last year with a hamstring injury, and then bounced back to really carry Trinity Christian to a state championship last year. As Mark, I see you up there on the screen. Definitely, he's a top 5 running back in the country. Previous committed to Oklahoma and Georgia. And Florida had to fight off Penn State. And speaking of Penn State, Florida had to flip Stokes, the quarterback, from Penn State. So there's a lot of Penn State storylines there for Florida there. And then, as you mentioned, TJ Searcy, he committed on the 4th of July with big fireworks for the Gators. And probably going to be that more of the hand in the dirt defensive end. You get kind of caught up in outside linebacker, jack, edge rush, but I think he's going to be more the traditional hand in the dirt, go and get to the quarterback. That's pretty much what they've sold him. You are going to be a pass rusher. So he was Florida's highest commit until Eugene Wilson, another recent Gator commit, pops up and commits to the Gators. And Mark, for looking at Florida's offense, and minus 2020, of course, with Trask, Pitts, and Tony, Florida just needs a whole lot more playmakers on offense. They got plenty of receivers that have the big body, have the possession type, but they don't have anybody that can catch a screen pass and go 60 yards, and at the same time beat a defender off of press coverage and go down the field for, behind the defense. And that's what they're getting in Eugene Wilson here. Probably somebody who can come on campus and be an instant contributor in special teams, but also that playmaking ability of being able just to score anytime with the ball in his hands may kind of just expedite him getting on the field. As I said, it's no mistake, he's the highest player in Florida's class right now.
Got David Waters on the line, of course, Gators Breakdown, talking up Florida football, and we're just a week away from SEC Media Days and then on into August camp. David, anyone else out there that's made any kind of announcements in regards to when they will make their announcements with Florida in the mix? Any targets that seem to be close to making a decision?
Yeah, Mark, I think we'll probably stay at receiver. There, as I mentioned, with Eugene Wilson right there. He was listed as an athlete, but will play receiver for the Gators. But there's some pure receiver targets that the Gators are looking at right now, too. Andy Jean out of South Florida, former Miami commit. I'd look for, if he had to make a decision today, I think it would be Florida. He probably has a decision coming up soon. And Aiden Mazzell, it looks to be a Florida, Alabama, Georgia battle. So Florida going against the heavyweights right there for a receiver. Speedster, another guy, like another type of receiver Florida doesn't really have on the roster right now. A guy that can just really take the top off of a defense. And then DeQuavius Sorey, he's listed as a receiver, Mark, but I'm hearing behind the scenes may get shifted toward defense, may play safety for the Gators. There's some tape of him out there if you watch his highlights of him playing safety a bit too. And he plays safety, and I like it. He plays safety like a receiver. He goes up, if the ball's in the air, it's his. And you like that type of play from a defensive back there. So there's three guys right there. I think we should all be looking out for. And then we got to wait to the end of the month. Florida's got a lot of targets toward the end of the month. John Walker there at Osceola, Derek LeBlanc, Malik Bryant, Jackson, the DB from all that group there too. All those guys are deciding in late July. So, Mark, we're going to get Florida started July off with a bang, and they need to end July off with a bang as well.
Gators Breakdown, any audio platform, and also right here on YouTube. Catch it. It's the best in Florida football coverage. SEC Media Days starts July 18th. Billy Napier hits the podium on that Wednesday and brings who with him?
He will bring quarterback Anthony Richardson. No really surprise there. This might be the only year Mark Florida fans get to enjoy Anthony Richardson as a starting quarterback for the Gators. We'll see how the year goes, but of course, getting all kind of draft love right now before he takes off as a starting quarterback for the Gators. Also, Richard Garage played a lot of football along the offensive line for the Gators. He anchors that left side, left tackle position. I really enjoyed getting to talk to him back this spring, so he'll bring a lot to the table as far as that goes. And then Ventrell Miller, who was also at last year's SEC Media Days, will be back at SEC Media Days. But we'll get to see something a little bit different from him because he played at the very beginning of last year and then got injured and missed the rest of the year. And now a coaching change as well. Had some classes that he was taking in the spring, so he didn't partake in all of spring practice. But from all accounts, Mark, we were hearing that when he was on the field, even in the new defense, he was a force out there to be reckoned with. So Anthony Richardson, Richard Garage, and Ventrell Miller, who are the Gators be taking SEC Media Days next week.
Yeah, I was just coming across whether it was Phil Steele or Athlon, some of those publications, some talk about Ventrell Miller and how good he looked in the spring. It's almost like a new addition. He played so little last year, just a couple games before he got hurt. 84
and you can tell,
tackles.
Mark, and you could tell Florida missed his leadership big time last year. I mean, with everything that went wrong on last year's team, they could have used some leadership out there in the field, and you could tell that he was sorely missed out there. So even in the new defense, I think they're going to rely on him a lot to kind of just anchor everybody, make sure everybody's on the same page in this new Patrick Toney defense.
David, I'm intrigued with the performance of this team coming up this year because I look around college football and I think the Gators are a bit unique to just their positioning in regards to this. We know what the standard is. We know what's been accomplished in the past. So that's top 5 to 10 in the nation. We know that this team's not prepared to do that, but I think it's being discarded as a complete also ran by a lot of people that Florida's not going to do anything this year because Georgia's the standard in the division. Kentucky gets a lot of love because of, Mark Stoops, Will Levis, a Heisman Trophy candidate, getting some pub. Of course, Josh Heupel in Tennessee, just because of them scoring a lot of points. Hendon Hooker, a starting quarterback with a 31 touchdown, 3-pick season under his belt, getting a lot of love as well. And there being known commodities with like a USC and a Lincoln Riley as a first-year head coach, or Brian Kelly at LSU, and people thinking more, Billy Napier, we know he knows what he's doing, but he hasn't done it at this level. So there seems to be more of a wild card factor with Florida football among all the elites that have question marks.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, we're not too far removed from, Florida's played Alabama twice in the last year and a half and has played them tougher than anybody else besides Georgia. The very next week, after playing, barely losing to Alabama, beat the brakes off of Tennessee the very next week. And then it all fell apart for Dan Mullen in Florida. So, we're not that far removed from people looking at Florida as a pretty darn good team. I remember the talk after Florida barely lost to Alabama last year, and it was like, all right, maybe we wrote off Florida too soon. Maybe it's going to be another Florida-Alabama rematch in Atlanta before the wheels fell off. And teams caught up a little bit too. Florida was kind of a misnomer, but didn't really know what to expect from Emory Jones at quarterback and all that. And then, as I said, as good as they called Tennessee early before Hendon Hooker really took off at the same time. But still, that's how far we were removed. No, not that far removed from a lot of positive talk about Florida. So I do think Florida probably gets graded a little too harsh for what was going on last year. I think the coaching staff didn't do these kids much favor last year. I think they quit playing for the staff. So you do hope at least effort goes a long way this year in turning around the record for Florida. It is a bit of a tough schedule. It is a bit of a tough start with Utah and Kentucky in the first couple games. But, Mark, I mean, as I said, there's still a lot of talent. If you want to go by pure talent, pure recruiting rankings, Florida's still the second most talented team in the East, and it's really not all that close. So if the guys can play up to their talent. Now, don't get me wrong, Tennessee's got some guys that were developed last year, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They make up that pure talent difference. Kentucky and just what Mark Stoops has built, they make up, with their development and their culture with that pure talent deficit. But at the same time, Florida still has the second most talented roster in the East, and we'll see what that means and how fast Billy Napier can put it all together.
David, for the second consecutive summer, we've had a seismic shift in college football. 1 year ago, Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC. Now the Big Ten makes its counter move to go get Los Angeles and USC, UCLA. And now there's this thought that, okay, they're forming as the two superpowers. There's a Notre Dame component there, possibly to the Big Ten. Maybe the SEC goes after Clemson, Florida State, Miami, or some contingent from the ACC. What is Florida's stance, as best you can tell, about adding Florida teams, namely FSU and Miami, to the SEC?
Of course, they're not going to like it. I mean, that's one advantage you have over those schools. You get the big paycheck. You get the notoriety of playing in the SEC. You get those big-time matchups week in and week out. I mean, that's one advantage that you have over those schools. And Mark, it sounds like, according to, I think it was Matt Hayes who put out an article earlier this week. It looks like the SEC is going to stand pat at 16. They realize what USC and UCLA has done to the Big Ten, but by bringing Texas and Oklahoma, they right now see it. There's no need to make another move. Now, if Notre Dame comes over to the Big Ten, my thing is, does the SEC get wind of that? I mean, they're not going to let the Big Ten have Notre Dame. I wouldn't think. While there are conversations between the SEC and Notre Dame that need to happen at the same time, and let Notre Dame just kind of pick where they want to go at that point. But if Notre Dame does go to the Big Ten, it can open the door for the traditional powers of Miami and FSU to make way into the SEC, and same for Clemson. They're out of South Carolina. I'm sure South Carolina's not going to like. That's one advantage. Right now, that's pretty much the only advantage they have over Clemson. So, and you see South Carolina improving their recruiting profile just a bit too with Shane Beamer, and they probably like to keep whatever little advantage they have. They probably at least like to keep that one. So I'm sure Georgia doesn't want to see Georgia Tech. Florida doesn't want to see Florida State and Miami. Clemson, I mean, South Carolina doesn't want to see Clemson. So right now it seems like the SEC is going to stand pat, Mark. But as you know, a lot of these alignment announcements have just come out of left field, come out of nowhere, and it could just be. Let's put out the word. We're not interested in these teams. And next week at SEC Media Days, Greg think you could come up Monday and say, all right, we're adding Clemson, we're adding Florida State, we're adding Miami, and we're adding somebody else, and there's our 20 teams. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least if we get another, left field announcement sometime at SEC Media Days.
Or maybe want to do that, I don't know, a few days after SEC Media Days so he doesn't have to deal with the circus. I don't know.
Yeah, that would be the best thing, because I would hate having to be there the rest of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not be. I mean, look, it's already going to be a lot about that anyway. But there is a football component to this, and I'd hate to be overshadowed by all the expansion talk.
As you well know, even though Florida is well protected, they're a big member of the SEC, so it really doesn't involve them to a certain extent. I'm sure you get hammered with these kind of questions and comments constantly because that's all people want to talk about now.
Yeah. And that's summertime. I mean, we're waiting on football, but SEC Media Days has kind of always been that kickoff to football. And at least for me, there's still going to be a lot of football content from it. But of course, the national narrative is going to be expansion, NIL, transfer portal, all that kind of stuff as well.
All right, folks, go to your favorite audio platform and search Gators Breakdown, or find it right here on YouTube. Best in Florida football coverage. David, always appreciate you stopping by, man.
Thanks, Mark.